Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Brenna, and I'm the Director of Education here at Test Innovators. Our webinar today is everything that you need to know about the Character Skills Snapshot. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll send the whole recording off to everybody who registered. Throughout, feel free to type any questions that you have in the Q&A field. If we have time at the end, I'll answer as many of those as we can get to. And if there are any that we don't get to, I'll review any questions after the webinar and respond to everyone who wrote in. With that, let's talk about the snapshot. And starting with the basics, the snapshot is a tool that was designed to measure non-cognitive abilities or character skills, thus the Character Skills Snapshot. It was created by the Enrollment Management Association, which is the same company that creates the SSAT. And it's taken by students in grades 5 through 11 as part of their independent school admissions process for any schools that are asking for it, or you might send it as a supplement even if the school isn't asking for it. The name of the snapshot is relevant in that it was named that in order to recognize that character skills change over time, and this is just a snapshot of where your students' character skills are at the moment that they answer the questions on the snapshot. So and I know that we may have participants here who are coming from many different lenses in looking at this, but particularly for any parents who are thinking about their student taking the snapshot as part of their application to independent schools, it's really important to remember that this is exactly that, just a reflection of where your student is at that moment in time. Getting into some more details about the snapshot, one of the important questions is, why was this created? Why is this now part of the application? And the reason is because people asked for it. And that came actually from both sides of the admissions process. Schools wanted to have a way to measure non-cognitive abilities, and parents also wanted it. Oftentimes you would have parents in some interviews or conversations saying, but, let me tell you these other wonderful things about my child that have to do with their character skills, these things that aren't currently part of the application in a formal way. And thus, the snapshot was created to fill that void. Of course, part of this is that non-cognitive abilities, character skills, are important. They're linked to academic success and work-life success. And in including this into the application process, it allows schools to develop a more holistic view of each applicant as they're applying. So in addition to all of the other pieces of the application that are still there, this can give them a standardized measure for those character skills. So it is designed just to complement those other assessments that are also there, such as the SSAT, or if any of you are taking the ISE, those traditional cognitive assessments. Again, in thinking about why this was created and why schools are looking for this, why your student might be taking this, part of the appeal of independent schools often is that you're interested in an education that helps to build character skills in students. And so it's a natural piece of that to also look at it then when students are entering that incoming class. And thus the school can help to encourage the personal growth for whatever their class of students looks like. Now that you know a bit about what the test is, how was it created, the snapshot was first released last year, and even before that, significant testing had been done. Thousands of students had taken the test, had reviewed different items, had been through many statistical analyses. Certainly there is much more of this you can read about. The Enrollment Management Association, creators of the snapshot, have a great deal of their research available on their website if you want to read more about the details of how they tested this and how they determined that this was the best way to do any piece of what they were doing. And then even before its release, lots of people had done this. Then in last year's pilot, more than 16,500 students took the snapshot. And again, Enrollment Management Association analyzed all of those results to see what they could get from that. And in fact, the test did change. The assessment changed a bit after last year. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we delve into the specifics here. The snapshot measures several different skills, and we'll just run through them quickly so that you know what they are. There's intellectual engagement, which is essentially defined as a student's enjoyment of and willingness to pursue learning. This is a little bit different from what it was last year. For anyone who happens to have had the opportunity to take the snapshot last year as well, or may have had a child who was taking the snapshot last year as well. Last year, this was intellectual curiosity, and they found that this was a slightly better term for what they were measuring with the test items that were measuring this. There's teamwork, which is a student's ability to engage in supportive behaviors and collaborate productively. Initiative, which is a student's inclination to start work on assignments in a timely manner. Notice that this is about starting work in a timely manner, so it's not necessarily saying anything about when a student finishes work. The focus is definitely on the start. Resilience, a student's ability to adjust to unexpected situations. Open-mindedness, a student's willingness to try new things. Self-control, a student's ability to control their thoughts and actions. And social awareness, which is a student's ability to identify context-appropriate behaviors. And now, keep these in mind as we move on to this next slide, because each of these skills is measured a little bit differently. And so I'll tell you about that in a second, but these first 6 are essentially grouped together. So everything from intellectual engagement through self-control and social awareness is actually tested or assessed in a slightly different way. Because the snapshot has 2 different types of questions. The first set of questions are what are called forced choice questions. There are 19 of those, and those test for those first 6 character skills. And then there are 10 situational judgment questions, and those are designed to measure social awareness. Now, what are those types of questions? Let's take a look at a couple examples. So the forced choice questions, in these, you are given 3 statements, and you select one that describes you most accurately, one that describes you least accurately. Essentially, what you're doing is you're ranking them from this is most like me to this is least like me. And the 3 things might look something like this. I enjoy difficult tasks. I easily adapt when plans change. And it is difficult for me to concentrate when I'm stressed. So you'll notice that you may be able to look at these and think about which of those character skills we just defined each of these might correlate with, which of course is how ultimately the measures and results of your character skills snapshot come out. Another thing to keep in mind just in thinking about the snapshot and thinking about how this is assessed and how it works for your student is that the snapshot is designed to reflect how a student sees themselves. So the student is going to sit down and rank these for themselves, and their self-perception may in fact be different from, say, what you would even say. That may even be an interesting thing for you to see potentially as a parent, but it's really all about which of these things they think are most like them and least like them. So you may in fact be interested to see what the results show, and if they match your understanding of your students' character skills. So that's a forced choice question. And then let's take a look at a situational judgment example. So for these, you're given a scenario. So we'll take a look at this one. It says your teacher has asked you to be the group leader for a team of 10 students on a big after-school project in the school gym. 2 students have come to you complaining that one of the students has a habit of talking loudly on his cell phone while the group is working on the project. This happens so often that they feel it is interfering with their ability to get the project done. So that's our scenario. And then this piece is always the same. Students will be asked to rate the appropriateness of each statement. So from 1, which is not appropriate at all, to 4, which is very appropriate. And you can assign the same rating to more than one response. So for instance, there might be 2 that you think are very appropriate and 2 that you think are not appropriate at all. So you'd have 2 4s and 2 1s. So let's take a look at some of the responses you might have. Introduce a policy banning cell phone use while working on the team project. It is best to have a single standard for everyone. Move the phone using student to an area of the gym where no one will hear him. The fewer people that are bothered, the better. Hang signs in the hallways reminding students to keep their voices down. Anonymous reminders avoid singling out any one person. Approach the student privately and ask him to keep his voice down. He may not realize that his behavior bothers people. So again, each of these, the student would say, is this appropriate? Is this not appropriate? So that's what the test looks like. Let's get into the logistics. When do students take the snapshot? It can only be taken once per academic year. So from August 1st to July 31st, students can take it once. So if your student has already taken it, they're done. They have taken it for this year. And if they haven't, they'll just be taking it once. And it will, again, just provide a snapshot of where their character skills were at that time. It is available on demand, online, and a couple details about that. Parental consent will have to be provided before the student gets into it. And there's also an integrity statement that's signed by the parent and the child. So the objective there, of course, being to make sure that the child provides their own answers to each of the questions on the snapshot. And that's done before you go into the snapshot. You cannot take it out of school or on a phone, again, just logistically. Generally can be taken at home or anywhere else that has internet access. The snapshot is untimed, so technically you can take as long as you want, but it generally takes about 20 minutes on average based on all the students who've done it. It does have to be taken in one sitting. So if you are thinking about when to take it and you have just a 10-minute window and you think your student would sit down to take it, probably a good idea to hold off. You have all the way until whenever your application deadline is for getting the snapshot in. So worth it to wait until there's enough time so that they can be relaxed and have buffer to really finish it and be thoughtful about all of their answers. In terms of some other details, there's a $35 fee to take the snapshot. However, it's free for students registered for the SSAT. So if a student has already taken the SSAT, if you registered for the SSAT, you can already take the snapshot for free. If you did not take the SSAT, you didn't take any test, or you took the ISE, anything like that, there are fee waivers available as well. And you can just take a look at the specifics on the snapshot site. Essentially, you'll be asking the schools that you're applying for, they'll have fee waivers available. The results of the snapshot will be available about 2 weeks from completion of it. So you'll be able to see that, and you can send it to as many schools as you want, and it works exactly the same way. Essentially, you'll have an account through SSAT. If you already took the SSAT, registered for the SAT, any of that, then you'll be able to send your snapshot results the same way that you send your SSAT results. All of it is available on that parent guardian SSAT account. The results measure to what degree a student exhibits each of the skills that we talked about initially. The 3 different categories are emerging, which means that the student is starting to show signs of that skill. And these are all still based on norm groups. So that's for a student who's at or below the 25th percentile for that skill. Developing, this means that that skill is present, still developing, and that's between 25th percentile and 75th percentile. And then demonstrating means that the student has a clear understanding and use of that skill. And so that's for students who were above the 75th percentile for a specific skill. It's compared against a norm group, and that norm group is split into 2 age groups. So in order to be more fair to students, it's separated according to middle school students and high school students, essentially. So everyone applying to high school is grouped together, everyone applying to middle school is grouped together, and middle school and high school students are not being compared. Now that you know what results look like, of course, the natural question is, well, how will the school that I'm applying to be using those results in their admissions process? There are a couple of things that are true across the board here, and then there are some things, of course, that it can really vary from school to school. The general idea is that the snapshot serves as a standardized measurement of character. So it is something that is consistent across all applicants. They'll all have taken exactly the same assessment, and you can, in fact, truly compare two students coming from completely different places. It is definitely designed to complement other parts of the application. This is not suddenly becoming the be-all and end-all of any student's application. This is used in conjunction with all of the other parts of the application: the interviews, the essays, the grades, the test scores, the letters of recommendation. Everything else as part of that application is still there. It is definitely not a standalone measure. These are sort of general trends about how schools may use it, but each school, each admissions department is different. Exactly how they evaluate the results of the snapshot will vary. It's a very good idea, if you're curious, simply to ask, to reach out to the school, their admissions department, and ask them what they're doing with it, because you'll find that some schools are doing very interesting and very different things when it comes to snapshot results. You'll hear everything from it being really sort of part of their full assessment, and that they use it perhaps similarly to how they might be using SSAT or ISE test scores, or they might be using it not really as part of the application itself, but later. So they might be using it to help place students into homeroom or advisory groups based on where they fell on their character skills assessment, so that they create good groupings. So definitely reach out if you have questions about a specific school and how they may be using it. And of course, last but not least, we are Test Innovators, and we help students prepare and practice for standardized tests. So what do we recommend? How do you get yourself ready for this? And of course, the reality is, I am not about to tell you that you should do some intensive test prep for the Character Skills Snapshot, but there are some things that are always helpful. Knowing what to expect and knowing what you're about to do is always a good idea, and it always helps also just to make sure that students understand what they're about to do and are taking it seriously and are really being thoughtful about their answers, because they know the purpose of this. So talking with them about what to expect and why they're doing it are all very good ideas. I am sure and confident that every student taking this snapshot has good days and bad days. And a good recommendation is just to take the snapshot on a good day. So if you're thinking about when to sit down and answer these questions, and the student might be a little cranky, probably not the best time to take those 20 minutes to answer these questions. Do it at a time where you're rested, relaxed, and have time and space, again, to be thoughtful. If you have any specific questions, again, about how schools might be using this, go ahead and reach out to them, and I'm sure they'd be happy to discuss what their school is thinking with this, especially as it's a relatively new metric, and it's good to foster dialogue, conversation around that. With that, let me take a look and see if we have any questions that have come in here. So I will give it a minute here. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A. And we will be sending the recording to this out to all the registrants, along with a link to the Snapshot website if you want to look up any additional information or details about any pieces of this. But feel free to send any questions here if you have them right now, or you can always reach out to us later and we'd be happy to answer them. Contact information, this is our email address and phone number if you'd like to reach out and ask any questions you may have about the snapshot or anything else related to your testing or application this season. And I have a question that just came in. And the question is, so when preparing the student and talking with them presumably about what to expect and what they're doing is the perspective from who they are right now or who they aspire to be? That's a great question. It's really supposed to be about who they are right now, sort of how they perceive themselves. I think that it's an interesting question because I imagine, though honestly this is not my area of expertise, so I should perhaps not speculate, that part of you is actually who you aspire to be. So students, I'm sure, are reflecting in their answers oftentimes what they may think of as sort of their best selves, but also probably some reality of knowing what their strengths really are and perhaps what their weaknesses are. But the main goal, the real objective, is to answer them as truthfully as possible, to really say, like, looking at these three things. And I think one of the things that's very interesting, I actually had the opportunity to take the snapshot myself a few months ago. And it can be really challenging because with those first forced choice questions, they may all actually seem like, if you were thinking about it theoretically, each of them seems like they're good skills. So when I think of like, okay, well, if I were trying to come up with who is the best person I could be, which of these should I be most like and which of these should I be least like, it would be very hard because I'd look at them and I'd say, well, all of these may be characteristics of a good person. So it's actually easier to say, well, but which of them is most true of me? Which of these is, most descriptive and accurate to the way that I am in the world? So I would really focus on that, essentially. At the end of the day, saying, which of these describes you best? What do you think is true of you right now? And that should also make it so that the test results are actually really representative, which is ultimately the goal. And it looks like I don't have any other questions here. Again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have anything else you'd like to chat about or any other questions you'd like us to help with. And best of luck to everyone in the application process. And thank you again for joining. Have a nice evening.